Now, one of the biggest societal movements in recent times is the feminist movement, you know, the liberation of women to have equal rights. You know, in the past, women didn't have the same rights that they have now. The right for women to work, have an education, just being liberated. And some thought they were dependent on men and, you know, it was a patriarchal structure and, in some situations they could be taken advantage of. So this movement was set up to liberate women. Like with all things, it's not just one side is right and the other side is wrong. There's more of a balance. There's pros and cons to everything. So with feminism, giving women the right to vote, right to have an education, rights, just being equal citizens in society, I guess you can say that is a positive. In my opinion, though, with feminism, it hasn't all been positive. And even though there have been positive outcomes, if you was to ask me what is my general assessment of feminism, whether it has been positive for society or negative for society, if I was to pick one of the two, even though it has its positives and negatives, I will say it's a net negative. The reason being is because I believe it's led to the breakdown of the nuclear family. Because what's happened, whether intentionally or unintentionally, is with liberating women, it has led to a sort of conflict, competitiveness with men, which in my opinion has contributed towards the breakdown of families, which is men at the head and then women and then children. But we've given women equal rights, and in some cases, some of them believe they're superior. It's led to a lot of conflict and competition. I'm not saying there can't be any conflict in a situation where the man is the head and there's no feminism, but I'm saying this has further contributed towards that. And I think the nuclear family structure is a very important part of society. So anything that is contributes towards that breaking down, I think would be a negative. Another reason is that I don't think it has improved the mental health of women or men. Even though it's come with positive outcomes for women in terms of social, economically, politically, you can say, in many ways, for all the, famous popular women who have benefited of feminism, there are also women who, just because they're not visible, it's affected them in terms of not knowing what to choose, whether to be a family, whether to start a family at a younger age where they're biologically able to, or pick a career. There's this confusion. And a lot of the times when they reach an older age, they can tend to be, regretful, lonely, and wish they had made a different choice. And I don't think that is said as much by the, pro-feminist movement, because there's a lot of talk about how far women have come, and you can say that from an economic point of view. But what about the decline in other things, such as family structure? There's the whole birth rate decline, conflict with men, a lot of the times focusing on yourself as a woman, being independent, can bring issues in terms of finding a male counterpart, because in relationship, it's not just about yourself, it's about the other person. So there's an unselfish nature that you have to have being in a relationship. Listen, I'm not a relationship expert, but, it does make sense to prioritize your partner, not just yourself. And a lot of with the feminist liberation and all of that, it's the prioritization of yourself, in my opinion, a lot in comparison to the other gender. Not to say there wasn't justified reasons for feminism in the first place. I'm not saying that, and I've just given you, positives in terms of feminism. But I do think, as an overall, if I was to pick whether it's been positive for society or negative, I would sway towards the negative, because I think it's contributed to the breakdown of the nuclear family. I think the mental health of women and men has declined. With men, when you liberate women and try to put women in positions of power and have all of these quotas to, hire women and that, I think with some men, they get left behind and then they become, what's the word? They don't know their purpose, where they fit in society. If you sometimes focusing too much on one makes you neglectful over the other. So, and then women within themselves, there's been a lot of confusion in terms of what they should do. Should they be a career woman? Should they be a mom, start a family? So, just in terms of breakdown of family, people's mental health declining, and the constant bickering and conflicts it creates. And with a lot of women, I'm not saying every woman thinks like this, but a lot of the time, the ideal man that they would want in the first place is somebody who is doing better than them, somebody that they can look up to. I'm not saying every woman thinks like that, but there is a percentage of women who think like that. So if you're promoting a movement of equality, that doesn't account for the fact that some women are attracted to somebody that they can look up to, not somebody that's not an equal in a lot of things. The whole talk about hypergamy. But yeah, I think it's had its positives. We're in 2026, so you can say feminism is, alive and well. The people that started it, over time, it's become successful in terms of what they wanted to create. I don't think in a lot of ways we live in a male-dominated society, even though men do dominate in certain aspects, but I don't think there's any job in the world where if a man and woman work the same amount of hours and they have the same level of competence, a man will be paid more just because of being a man. I don't think that exists. I think with the whole gender pay gap, a lot of it is down to how much hours the person works, the fact that women do get pregnant, and industries that pay more as well. But just for the subject of feminism, even though there have been positives in the movement, I do think there's been negatives. And if I was to choose if it's been positive or negative in society, I do think it's been negative. But that's just my opinion.